We are now in chapter 2, and regarding this chapter, as you know, is talking about physiology. And we know from the medical terminology what we mean by the word physiology. We know that from medical terminology, the word ology means study of, and phys means function. So the study of the function of the heart as pumping action is going to be discussed this chapter. What we need to know about our heart is the following. Number one, like you know, it is very important for us to be familiar about the circulation of blood within our heart. And of course, as I mentioned from you this morning lecture, that you have a problem with the circulation and how the circulation is going on. So let us make our job easy and let us start from the scratch about the circulation, because you don't have like easy subject and circulatory system. So let us go step by step. Number one, we know that our heart is made of 4 chambers. Where these 4 chambers? This number 1 in order, this number 2, this number 3, this number 4. Okay? I need everyone to pay attention to my cursor. Okay? This is the first chamber. We call right atrium. Then we have the second chamber. We call right ventricle. Then the blood is going to the lung and come back from the lung through the pulmonary veins, going to the left atrium. And then from left atrium, we have left ventricle. This means what? This means the right side of the heart, right atrium and right ventricle. This is what I mean by right side of the heart. Left side of the heart, I mean left atrium and left ventricle. So let us have certain points, and this points is valid throughout our study. The blood in the right side of the heart is deoxygenated blood. What we mean by deoxygenated? It means low oxygen content, but more carbon dioxide content. Okay, what about the left side? The left side of the heart contain oxygenated blood. Means what? Means the blood rich of oxygen. Why it is rich of oxygen? It comes because it comes from the lung after loaded by oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. So the question in the exam asking you, the right side of the heart, rich of what? Rich of carbon dioxide. The left side of the heart, rich of what? Rich of oxygen, and so on. So you have to know the concept, and according to this, you are going to answer the question perfectly. We have very important big vessel. What these are? You see this one? This is superior vena cava. What we mean by superior? Superior means upper or higher. Vena means a vein. Cava means wide or hollow. So we have one superior and we have one inferior. Both of them, guys, both of them, again, both of them open in the right atrium. You see? Both of them open in the right atrium. This is number one. So what is the superior? Vena cava drain. Drain blood from head, neck, and upper trunk. What about the inferior vena cava? The inferior vena cava will drain blood from lower limb, pelvis, abdomen, and lower trunk. Clear? Any questions so far? All right. So this number one, blood will be collected from every part of the body through superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. The superior vena cava collect blood from head, neck, and upper trunk, and the inferior vena cava collect blood from lower limb, pelvis, and abdomen and lower trunk. That's it. Then the blood now is in the right atrium here. We have a valve, like we learned last lecture, that this valve allows the blood in one-way direction. You see this arrow? So it allows the blood in one-way direction. So what is the direction? From the atrium to the ventricle. Okay? From atrium to the ventricle. From right atrium to right ventricle. Through what? Through the tricuspid valve. Clear? All right. Now, when the heart contracts or the ventricle contracts, it is going to push the blood, which is here. It is going through this pulmonary artery. You see the cursor? Pulmonary artery. And we learned from last lecture that pulmonary artery contain what? Deoxygenated blood, which is against the rule, the only issue against the rule. Okay, what we mean by the word pulmonary? The word pulmonary means lung or pulmonic, coming from the word pulmonic. Pulmonic means lung. So this pulmonary artery will carry, this is question in the exam, the pulmonary artery carry deoxygenated blood from right ventricle to both lungs. That's it. So this is the summary. Okay. Now, the blood is in the lungs. What happened? Through the alveoli, the blood get rid of carbon dioxide and loaded by oxygen. Wonderful. So now the blood in the lungs getting more oxygenated. So it is oxygenated blood. By the suction power of the left atrium, the blood return from the lung to the left atrium through what? Through 4 pulmonary veins. And this is also against the rule. We know that the rule, the vein contain deoxygenated blood, but here the pulmonary veins, there are 4, carry oxygenated blood from the lung to left atrium. That's it. I forget to tell you that what is the valve here. We know that the valve allow one-way direction. We have semilunar valve. We had this last lecture. This semilunar valve we call pulmonic valve going to the pulmonary artery. Okay. Now, back to our subject here. The blood here, rich of oxygen, has to go down. Through what? This valve is mitral valve. And the blood, after being here in the left ventricle, will be ejected during the systole, going into, you see this arrow? It's going into the aorta. And this aorta is the biggest artery in our body. From the aorta, we have like this arch. You see, this is arch. And from the arch, we get like 3 big branches going to the neck and the upper limb. And after that, we go with the continuation of the aorta. This one is continue behind the heart like here. So this is descending aorta. So this is simply when we talk about the circulation of the blood within our heart. It should be clear. We mentioned the order. What is the question coming in this exam? It will ask you, what are the biggest vein in your body? The answer is superior and inferior vena cava. This is the biggest vein in our body. what is the biggest artery inside our body is the aorta and its continuation, the arch of the aorta, and so on. Clear? So what are the order? The order of the blood is right atrium, right ventricle, then lung, then left atrium, left ventricle, then go to the aorta to be distributed to every part of the body. If you have any question regarding this issue, let us clarify this for you.
The valve that from the right ventricle to the aorta, there's a valve right there.
No, not from right ventricle
Or
to the
left
aorta.
ventricle. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's right, left ventricle to the aorta. We have another valve which is semilunar. We call it is aortic valve.
A question?
Yes.
So the order is pulmonary artery, or the superior vena cava, which carries the deoxygenated blood, and the inferior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood to the right atrium, to the right ventricle, to the aorta,
No,
and to lungs.
no.
Oh.
Right ventricle to pulmonary, to lungs, then come back to the left atrium, then left ventricle, then the aorta to be distributed everywhere.
Okay. Right,
Got it, Aaron? Okay.
What valve is between left atrium and the right? Is it the right ventricle?
There is no communication between right and left side of the heart.
Right ventricle.
Right ventricle, right ventricle, pulmonary. Pulmonary to lungs. Left ventricle, aorta, aorta to every part in the body. That's it.
Okay.
Dr. Israel, so the valve between the left ventricle and the aorta is the aortic valve?
Correct.
There's a valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle?
Left atrium, left ventricle, we have a valve called mitral valve.
Okay.
Okay. Any question before we leave this slide? All right. So here you find that thus each slide is like telling you all the story which I mentioned to you, that what is the deoxygenated blood going to right atrium through superior vena cava and inferior vena cava and so on. So it is repetition to every item I told you regarding what is the circulation inside the heart. Now, we need to know what we mean by cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle means systole, means contraction, followed by diastole. Okay? Contraction, systole. Relaxation, diastole. Okay? So, Aaron, if you are listening to the lecture while eating, so you can make your video off. Okay, thank you. So what is the cardiac cycle? The cardiac cycle is systole followed by diastole, and we understand what we mean by each term. I need you to practice with me this very important issue, which we are going to repeat it tomorrow, and it makes sense for us. I will consider, this is my right hand, if you can consider this, and in the video, this is my right hand. And when contract like this, it represents the two atrium, the upper two chambers. And my left hand represent the two ventricles. And we notice what? How our heart is working. If our heart working like this, you see my hand? We will die. Never happened this before. It should be what? When we have like here, the right hand, two atrium, the left hand is two ventricle. So the two atrium contract while the two ventricle relax. Then the two ventricle contract and the two atrium relax. So this is how our heart works. So I need you to simulate what I'm doing. It will help you for understanding in the future how we get this action of EKG. So my right hand or the top hand represent the two atrium working together, and the lower hand or left hand represent the two ventricle working together. I need everyone to do the same like what I'm doing. Okay? So, very important, this question, that ventricles fill with 70% of blood passively. It doesn't need contraction from the atrium. Why? Because the atrium is just on top of the ventricle. It doesn't need any effort to push, but the ventricle, very strong. It has to push the blood from the heart even to your small or big toe in your soul. So it has to be strong. This is why this question comes to you in the exam. Why the ventricle wall is thicker than the atrial wall? Make sense? The ventricle wall has to be thicker than the atrial wall because it has to push the blood for long distance against resistance. So remember this word, distance, resistance. So the ventricle work against these two issues, distance and resistance. Like if I ask you, please drop this stone under your leg. It doesn't need any effort from you, right? So just leave it and it will go by gravity down. But if I ask you, please hold this stone and throw it away like 500 feet. So you need what? Effort from you to push this stone far away from your body. So this is the same story. And the cardiac cycle, like we mentioned, systole followed by diastole, has a time. And this time is very important. And tomorrow we will learn that the fraction of a second make a lot of difference between healthy and non-healthy person. So tomorrow we are going to learn with the graph that point fraction of a second can put the patient in intensive care, or we can ask the patient go home. You believe that? We will learn wonderful issues by tomorrow. So systole followed by diastole takes 0.8 seconds. Systole alone, 0.2 seconds. Diastole lasts almost 6 seconds, okay? So this means what? Diastole is longer than systole. So take notes of this slide. What we need to know from this slide is that diastole timing is bigger than systole timing. Okay? One more issue. That one cardiac cycle lasts 0.8 seconds. So how many cycles should be in 1 minute? We are going to divide 60 divided by 0.8. I will get the average is 75 beats per minute, okay? So the average heart rate for every one of us, without exception, is like 75. maybe getting higher, maybe getting slower. We know that the heart rate ranges between 60 up to 100, and this number is very important, Irene. You have to save it like you save your name, okay? 60 up to 100. And what is the average, Serena? It is 75 according to this information. Then, when we are going to diagnose patient with cardiac problem, we look for something which is what we call ejection fraction. It is not our job for EKG to know the ejection fraction. This is another story for master degree, but ejection fraction is the amount which is range between 55 up to 70%. If it is less than this, so this means the efficacy of the heart or the efficient work of the heart is not good. Okay, so the average is between 55 and 70%. Here it is like explanation for you the cardiac cycle, but all what we need is what is the total time for cardiac cycle, what is systole time, what is diastole time, and from these two equations we will get what will be the heart rate, average heart rate, and we know that diastole is longer than systole, okay? And this is like repetition for what is going on with the circulation, like the blood is coming from the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava to the right atrium. It is like repetition of what I mentioned to you. And remember, when you put both hands on each other, you will get the explanation of this technique exactly, okay? Let us have some values, and this values is what? It is very good for examination questions. You can answer it straightforward, and also for calculation in the future. What we mean by stroke volume, it is the amount of blood pumped out in one ventricle of the heart in a single heart contraction. This means what? Each time our heart do contraction, it will eject 70 milli. You know, milli is a measurement of, metric measurement of a liter. So it is not 1 liter or something, it is just 70. 70 milli per beat, So if I have my heart rate like 75, so I will multiply this 70 milli times 75, I will get the total amount of blood ejected or come out of the heart in a minute. And this is what we call the cardiac output. So remember this number. Stroke volume is 70 milli per beat. And if we have the heart rate, like we mentioned, the range between 60 up to 100 beats per minute, so the cardiac output, we multiply the stroke volume times the heart rate, we will get the amount of cardiac output, which is stands by CO. The cardiac output, which is the amount of blood coming out of the heart per minute, may be decreased. And this happens in heart failure, congestive heart failure, CHF, congestive heart failure, MI, myocardial infarction, or any stroke. We find that the blood coming out of the heart will be dropped and make the patient feel fainting, the patient is unconscious, the patient is unable to focus, and a lot of problem. You will find it, the definition or the symptoms of cardiac output if it is decreased. Like what? Like dizziness, like shortening of breathing, like chest pain, like cool, clammy skin, decreased blood pressure, and also the patient will not be able to focus. If the blood pressure is dropped, the patient is not going to focus enough. Here, it is another question. You find this in book and in certification exam. Say that what happened by the end of diastole. It is the pressure in the ventricle at the end of diastole. We call pre-load. Pre means before loading of the ventricle by the blood. So this is affected by the amount of blood coming from the right atrium. If the blood coming from the right atrium is big, so the preload will be increased, or it is decreased if the blood coming back to the heart is decreased, like in case of hemorrhage. If the patient has hemorrhage or the patient has dehydration, he will not be having enough blood volume coming back to the heart, so the preload will decrease. We have another one, which is afterload. What is afterload? It is the resistance, as I told you, remember, we have two words, distance and resistance. So it is the resistance against which the heart must bump. So make link between these two words, resistance and distance. So if the distance is big, so the afterload will be big. If the resistance is high, like in atherosclerosis, or we are not doing exercise, so this will be also affect the afterload of the heart. So these two definitions are of great importance. Please pay attention for them. The heart has nice phenomena. What this? It is called Starling. Starling is the name of the scientist. Starling law. What is Starling law? If I have rubber band and I pull the rubber band against each other and I will leave one end, it will recoil, and it will recoil very strong, right? We play this before, like we stretch the rubber band more, and we leave one, it will hit the other side, very painful. So what this application of this to the heart? When the heart is going to be stretched, it will contract strong. So when the heart is stretched, it will contract strong. This is phenomena we call Starling law, but it has a limit. If overstretching, it will fail. Like if you have a rubber band and it keep it stretched for a long time, it will lose its power for recoil, not like the new one. If you stretch it and leave it, it will recoil very fast and strong. So Starling law is very important phenomena as a physiology of our heart. Pay attention to it, please. Then we look for the resistance, which we mentioned, that can affect the afterload. Like what? The blood pressure, the cardiac output, and the peripheral vascular resistance, like if I have atherosclerosis or narrowing or vasoconstriction of the blood. This also make what we call PVR, P, peripheral, V, vascular, R, resistance. Okay? One more issue which is interesting. You know from your study of nervous system that we have autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means what? I am not controlling. It works by itself. Like if I ask you, El Haja, if you are under stress, what you feel? Your heart rate is like fast. At sleep, your heart rate is slow down. If you drink coffee, you find that your heart rate is fast. And so on. So this is like the effect of autonomic nervous system, which means emotion. If you are sad, if you are under stress, if you are facing exam, like you are driving under stress, all of this Aaron make like sympathetic stimulation, and this sympathetic make what? Rapid heart rate or increase blood pressure. So this is very important point. You have to pay attention to it. You know that we have for the autonomic nervous system, we have two types. One is sympathetic, which is for fight and flight, which is excitatory. like when we drink coffee, drink cigarette smoking, or you're under stress, or you don't have enough sleep, nervous, and fight. All of this stimulate the sympathetic. And the parasympathetic, like you are going to take hot shower before bed, and you drink like milk, and all of this like make you relax and go into a peaceful sleep. So it is for rest and digest. Remember this description. It is important in the exam. Fight and flight for sympathetic. Rest and digest for parasympathetic. Remember, for normal diurnal variation, we are alert in the morning, we are alert during the day, and we start to get less activity at night. I'm not talking about people like working at night shift. It is against the biological diurnal variation of our body. But in the daytime, we are alert, we are focused, you are driving, you are listening, you are learning. But at night, you are relaxing and get into sleep if you are not doing any activity, okay? So the nervous control of the heart is one of the important subject I need you to know. And also, you know from the nervous system that we have alpha and beta receptors for the sympathetic. And we have to be aware about this point. I don't need you to go into details, but remember, look guys, beta. We are going to learn medication which will slow the heart rate. We call beta blocker. So if I block this receptor, this sympathetic will not working. So it is going to slow down the heart. So our first medication today, I need you to save, is beta blocker. What is the job of this beta blocker? Slow down the heart and reduce high blood pressure. Okay? Because in the future, we are going to say that what makes the heart bradycardia? Bradycardia means slow heart. So what makes the heart bradycardia? One of this medication is this beta blocker, okay? And the sympathetic and parasympathetic and the receptors, all of this you had already with nervous system. But if you don't have it clear, you can ask me by the end of our lecture, okay? Here we have a summary regarding what is the job of beta 1, beta 2, and what are the job of alpha and beta. And this finish chapter 2, which is related to the physiology of the heart. I hope you catch something beneficial for today. If you have any question, of course, you are so welcome. I hope, Corinne, the circulation inside the heart is much better than before. All right, good to hear. Any questions?
Can you explain the beta blocker again?
The beta blocker is doing what? Very good question. For the sympathetic to work on the heart and other organs, it has a receptor. Without these receptors, it is not going to work. So if I block this receptor, so this adrenaline, or if I drink coffee in normal condition, if I drink coffee, the coffee will make my heart getting fast. But if I have beta blocker, so the caffeine has no chance to reach to the heart, so it will make no changes, make no fast heart, okay? So anything blocker means it is not, as if it is not present. So the effect of nervous system on it will be like lost. You got it? All right.
Our body produces that naturally?
Yes.
Hmm.
Any question? Yes, ma'am. Yes, Diana.
Just to clear up the beta blocker thing, so that's what makes our heartbeat go fast, right?
No.
Oh, it slows it down.
Yeah.
So if you want, the beta blockers will,
The beta blocker, like you find that the provider prescribe beta blocker to the patient, either to reduce the heart rate or to reduce high blood pressure. You got it? All right.